Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I am your host, Scott Brady, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Matt Scott, and we do the deep dive on the principles of overlanding expedition vehicle campers. So these are going to be the big expedition trucks that we see all over Instagram, man trucks, EarthRoamers, LMTVs. We're going to talk about why large vehicles like that are so popular for overlanding, how to prepare them properly, things to consider around those vehicles, and why sometimes bigger just might be better. And a special thanks to Rocky Talkies for their support of this week's podcast. Rocky Talkies are backcountry radios designed by a small team in Denver. The radios are extremely rugged, easy to use, and compact, weighing in at just under 8 ounces. They have a range of 1 to 5 miles in the mountains and up to 25 miles line of sight. The batteries will last from 3 to 5 days, and you can recharge them easily via USB-C right in the vehicle. Our team uses Rocky Talkies, and we also used them recently at the Overland Expo. The next Overland Expo, stop into our booth and say hello and check out the radios for yourself. And as a listener of the Overland Journal podcast, you can get 10% off a pair by going to rockytalkie.com/Overland Journal. Thanks again, Rocky Talkie. Okay, Matt, so we're going to talk about the principles of overlanding expedition vehicles.
Ooh, I'm excited for this one. This is my specific
It
niche.
is. And you have been doing a lot of research on it recently. You've been spending a lot of time on the category. And you also, I believe, have a really strong argument for the benefits of it and an understanding of the downsides, because you've now owned your EarthRoamer for how long?
Oh, we bought it at the end of 2020.
So yeah, that might be the longest you've ever owned a car.
Yeah, and I have zero interest in selling it. It is like my prized possession, so to speak. It had always been a goal. Like my goal when I was, just started working at Overland Journal 10 years. Well, it was more than 10 years ago. So it was 2011. I wanted an EarthRoamer with a KTM rally bike on the back. But I've got an EarthRoamer with a factory KTM rally bike in the back.
Okay, so how did your life change when you arrived at that goal? Like what? It's something that you've wanted forever.
I mean, obviously, it was a lot of work and a lot of stress. I think that to put it in a way that maybe society would understand is it's my boat. It's my boat that I go do my little projects on and I clean, and it's my own little ecosystem and world that I have complete control over.
Yeah.
So in the way that an entrepreneur or executive or something might have that boat that's their escape, the EarthRoamer is my land boat. And it's actually funny because there's a lot of systems that come from the marine world that are super applicable with expedition vehicles. But we just found out that we started getting out more and we changed how we traveled. We had for a long time really focused on, very remote places that other people couldn't get to. And that was, best evidenced by the vehicles that we were building. Look at the Gladiator that we had. If people don't know what it was basically an AEV Gladiator with adventure trailers or AT Overland Summit camper on the back. And that was awesome because we were able to get really, really remote.
As remote as you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get something, I don't think that there would be many vehicles more capable than that you could still kind of sleep inside of.
Yeah.
But we started to kind of hit our limits with that. We obviously we're doting Greyhound parents, and Laura and I are not small people. I'm 6'2", she's just under 6 foot. Our dog is 80 pounds and big, and that was a lot to ask from that small of a space to try and have some kind of temperature regulation or whatever. So we always knew that we wanted some kind of expedition vehicle, and the EarthRoamer for us just made so much sense because we knew from the Summit camper that we wanted something that was hard-sided.
Yeah.
Right? And how it, to go back to how it changed our travels is that we were less interested in, the very remote technical trails, because we actually ended up finding that those had become very well used. There was a lot of
And
people,
you've done a lot of them.
and we've done them, and I've done them 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Sure.
So it kind of lost its appeal, and eventually it just kind of felt repetitive. So, we kind of shifted, well, actually, the big thing that we noticed was that by going for maybe like easier spots, because obviously an EarthRoamer or an expedition vehicle does not have the same technical terrain capability as a light truck, although they're pretty good. We started doing a lot more national forests, and we started slowing down a little bit more. And
You have to slow down, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. And it became more about the experience of camping. And if you were in a place that didn't have an amazing view, you didn't have to do the rocky trail that went to the promontory point with the amazing lookout.
Yeah.
Well, one, we realized that that's what everybody else was doing with this whole
Sure.
explosion in overlanding. And we're spending a lot more time in national forests and national parks. We use it, sometimes we use it just like it was an RV. And I think that's really where I see the expedition vehicle space growing, as it is this amalgamation of overlanding as maybe it's perceived in the U.S., the forerunner with the roof tent, or the truck camper or something,
Sure.
mixed with a bit of the RV world, because you kind of have to have solutions and problems from both. And we love it. Like, we just absolutely love it.
Yeah, and you get out in it a lot. You
Yeah.
use it a lot. In fact, there's been many times I've come over to your house and we hung out in the EarthRoamer in your garage.
It's
like a cool little spot.
One, it's amazing to have a garage that your EarthRoamer fits inside of. Two, it serves this multi-purpose of, it's my, everybody wants to have that hangout
you retired. You're like a retired person at 30. Like, you bought the retired person's house that has like the room for the Class A motorhome, and it's perfect. It's
I love
like
it.
all
I
works.
love living in Prescott.
Yeah.
And it's, but to touch on that, by basing ourselves in Prescott, it allowed us to do this. You know,
Yeah.
if we were, if our business was based in Southern California, like so many, businesses are, our house would be 4 times the cost.
For
That's
sure.
where the money for the EarthRoamer came from. We really look at the EarthRoamer as our cabin.
Yeah.
We go out with family in it. We go out with friends in it, and it's,
You get to go to Greyhound events in it.
yeah, it's awesome. Like,
You do.
You get to be the star of the show.
Yeah.
It's, and it's also really nice for traveling with dogs. Ours is, it's a, 4-door LTS. So it's, LTS just means,
Stretch, yeah.
Essentially. So, again, we're able to go out with our friends that have toy haulers or travel trailers, and we're as much a part of that group as we are able to go out with friends in roof tents or truck campers.
Sure.
We can kind of go either way with it.
And we did that recently. Within the last couple months, we did that trip to Alamo Lake.
Yeah.
And I was towing a Patriot camper
Yep.
behind a Raptor R, and we took a backcountry route to get there. And
Yeah.
you went every single place that we went.
It was fun.
And that was my experience with, well, let's back up for a minute. And I think it would be good for the audience for us to define what we mean by an expedition vehicle, which a lot of times that term is interchangeable with expedition camper.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share what you believe is, like, what defines an expedition vehicle as opposed to
Yeah, to put
An overland
to
truck.
put it bluntly, it's more, you could think of it as an RV that is, capable of extended off-road travel.
Yeah.
Where a Class C motorhome might be able to go down the dirt road a little bit in quartzite to find, the campsite. It's not something that you're going to want to do with that vehicle, because long term, it will compromise the vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. So there's
and all the systems that you have on expedition
Exactly.
campers are much more robust and bigger capacity batteries, more water on board.
Yeah, so there's essentially, they're self-contained vehicles that I think one of the biggest qualifications is live inside. They don't have to be hard-sided. EarthCruisers, Some of the Ross Monster stuff, which is awesome and are definitely expedition vehicles, are pop tops.
Yep.
They often have a bathroom, a shower, some cooking facilities
Yep.
inside. Again,
The Nimbl vehicles are pop top. Yep.
Nimbl vehicles are pop tops, yes. So it is this, as I said earlier, kind of this amalgamation of, it's basically just an off-road RV. When you really, really get down to it, that's the best way to describe it. But
Yeah, off-road recreational vehicle.
I
Makes
believe
sense.
there's also an element, of I guess, you go from boats to yachts, and part of that jump is the quality,
Yep.
the quality, the components, the longevity of it. You definitely, I think that's part of an expedition vehicle.
Yeah, and it's not a yacht unless it's got a bathroom and a galley. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with these vehicles. Once you go to kind of an expedition camper, expedition vehicle, it's going to have a fully integrated kitchen. It's going to have a fully integrated bathroom.
Yeah, so like an expedition camper for me is like the AT Overland Atera.
Sure.
It's, it's not that it doesn't fulfill the same role as an expedition vehicle, but like they have some bathroom facilities, but I think they use like
A wrap-on style,
one of those toilets, and there'll be a shower, but maybe there's not a shower room, and it's not to disparage it. It's just that there's a difference between the two, both in functionality, but I guess at the end of the day also in cost. And it is different than a truck camper. A truck camper on the back of an AEV, whatever, like that's a great solution, but it's not really an expedition vehicle. Like I think we're talking, another defining characteristic of an expedition vehicle is something that it's an integrated system. I always call them integrated vehicles.
it's not a removable camper, really.
That was always the Expedition Portal forum heading, was integrated overland vehicles or integrated expedition vehicles or something. They're kind of all in one. Now that does have its downsides that, eventually I'll have enough miles on the chassis that, I can't take the camper, which is really then the value, and put it on another truck. That's the argument for like the Atera,
Sure.
for example.
It can be removed, and now you got a flatbed pickup that you can use for other things.
Yeah,
for sure.
The thing that I do recognize with a lot of these vehicles is, particularly when you get to like the Unicats and some of the Action Mobiles and the Bliss Mobiles, they're on truck chassis. Those things are measured in a lifespan, often in the millions.
Yeah.
Even with the F550, that is the basis of my vehicle, well maintained, that is a 500,000 mile truck if you want it.
Sure.
I like it because at the end of the day, it's a Ford truck.
You can go into any Ford dealership here in the U.S.
Yeah,
get it serviced.
I had an interesting experience. The EarthRoamer uses engine coolant to heat the hot water tank that's in the back of the vehicle, and there's coolant lines that run down the frame. 2 hours after buying mine, not really being familiar with the truck, one of those burst. Happened going through the Eisenhower tunnel. So it just cooked the motor. Vehicle made it home after we realized what was going on at the bottom of the hill. There was no alarms that went off. The coolant didn't even overheat because it was at night and 20 degrees or whatever. But I was able to take it to the Ford dealer in Prescott. They put a new motor in it. Yes, it was expensive. Did a lot of upgrades, and it was about 10% of what I paid for the vehicle. But it was able to be done.
Yeah.
So you can kind of look at these things as, if you're servicing them properly, who knows really what the lifespan of the machine is. You're not daily driving it as well. With an expedition camper, maybe you're using it as your daily driving pickup. Well, then you're putting, wear and tear on all this expensive stuff.
Yep.
And it accelerates the wear of the thing, which necessitates the fact that it has to get swapped out. Obviously, there's different budgets and different realities.
I like that definition, though. It's an off-road RV.
Yeah.
That is fully integrated with the chassis, and it's designed for prolonged remote travel.
Yeah, like I can do, El Camino del Diablo.
Yeah.
Every day of the week.
Absolutely.
In an expedition vehicle. Could you take a rental Class C motorhome down it? I mean, maybe, but like
I've done that road.
but,
There's
like,
not for very far.
You're not gonna want to own that thing at the end of it.
Yeah, and it actually is. It's a fairly challenging trail. Not the very last time that I did it, but the time before, Mike McMaud was with us,
Yeah.
and Dave Nordstrom was with us, and some other folks that had EarthRoamers, and some of them had Sprinter vans and other different vehicles. But we got the EarthRoamers through all of it, no problem. And when actually, even before I started the magazine, I worked with EarthRoamer, and I led a lot of their trips.
Yeah.
And I did a dozen adventures, including down Baja and everything else with EarthRoamers. And I was consistently shocked at where they could go.
Yeah.
The limitation really with these expedition vehicles is the height. So when you get into forested areas, you really got to make sure you're on major forest roads. So you're going to be looking at a road that's like 2 digits as opposed to 4 digits. Like if you see FR 72, you're probably golden in your expedition vehicle. If you're going down FR 3679 or whatever, B, the more numbers that you got to
I didn't
go.
actually know that.
Yeah, so that's a really
You learn something every day.
It's a quick tip.
So
for
in
those.
in that regard, we do a lot of 3-digit Forest Service roads. I like to think that with one of these vehicles, you can go pretty fast. Particularly with the Roamer, it's got a 4-link in the back, air suspension all the way around with King shocks. It's pretty capable, but your pots and pans are still rattling.
Yeah.
Your
because it's got a pass through, you can hear everything rattling.
Everything that you are carrying with, you have to also put that in mind. Like, I always say, like, you see these vans that have, all these, desert racing lights on the top, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but your thing can go 25 mile an hour off road lest you get hit in the back of the head by a pan.
That's right.
Like,
exactly.
There are inherent limits of taking a small house down a 4-wheel drive trail. I think Bill Swales, who founded EarthRoamer, and unfortunately passed a little bit ago, said that he had to design a house that was capable of withstanding constant earthquakes.
Yeah.
So all of your systems have to be very robust.
Sure.
I have the bias towards the EarthRoamer because it's what I know, but there's a lot of options out there.
Well, and it might be good. It might be good to kind of talk through, first of all, before we go into the individual models. Is you brought up a good point earlier before we started talking of serialized expedition vehicles and customized expedition vehicles, and I think that is a really important foundational discussion point. So an example of a serialized expedition vehicle is the EarthRoamer.
Yes. It
is the EarthCruiser. It is an adventure truck from GXV.
Yes.
It would be like some of the more recent Adrenalin Campers. There's more. We're not trying to exclude anybody. With it, we could spend the entire
and there's
podcast talking about
pluses
different brands.
and minuses to both.
Yeah.
By having a consistent layout that maybe has a few available changes for dinette versus couch, couch versus whatever. You got to think about the wiring harness that goes into these. Like, I think
they can standardize them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems that I see with some of these expedition vehicles, when they're custom or they're a new business, it's like kind of looking up the skirt as looking at the electrical systems. I can display the electrical system in the EarthRoamer to a electrical engineer, and they're like, "Wow, that's really nice."
Yeah.
I won't name names, but there's some out there that I've seen where I'm like, "Wow, like you've got like 12 positive wires crossed over each other, and all that stuff rattles and moves and wears," and I'm like, you gotta when you're asking for all of these custom modifications, and you want the camper with the rooftop party deck and the 12 other weird custom things that you want, that all comes as a compromise, and it can't be engineered as a system. It's like comparing a hot rod to a GT500 that comes off the line from Ford.
Sure.
One is engineered and consistent and has components, and if there's a failure, they can then fix that on the
Sure.
line and make those changes. Where with hot rods, you have the guy down the street that builds hot rods, and you have Delmo Speed that builds hot rods that is really, really good, and it's a craft. So that's the thing that you have
Get a big range.
You have to really understand that there's differences there, and are there things that I would like differently in my layout? For sure, but I also know that I can call somebody and say, I have ER107, what is the heater in my truck? And there's actually like, okay, cool, we'll send you the parts for that.
Yeah. Or you have something that stops working and you get EarthRoamer on the phone and you tell him you have ER107, and he's going to say, okay, you're going to open up the bathroom cabinet and there's going to be 4 screws that are going to hold this panel in place. You're going to take those 4 screws out. Okay, you're going to see the yellow and the green and the blue wire. Okay, you're going to
cut the blue wire.
Yeah, exactly. Cut the blue. Yeah. So, but there's a huge advantage to that because because it is serialized, and it's the same thing with EarthCruisers. When I borrowed an EarthCruiser, I had a minor issue, and I was able to call them up, and they're like, no problem. They knew exactly where the relay was. They knew exactly where the switch was. They were able to provide us with immediate support. The upside of the custom stuff is you get exactly what you think you want. But I want to talk about that for a second, because I think the problem is that people who buy custom expedition vehicles, they have never owned one before in most cases. They have rarely had like a sphere of experience.
Yes.
So they kind of have it in their mind that, okay, we want this alley or this galley style, and we want this giant bathroom, and we want this, and we want that, and everything else. And then they end up with this very unlivable space because it's got so much stuff packed into it. And it comes because they lack that experience, or they want to integrate all of this fancy new technology that hasn't been proven yet. And they're going to say, yes, this custom expedition vehicle company is going to be like, yep, it's like $1.2 million. Here's your camper. But the reality is that the closer you can get to, just like think of a Land Cruiser. Mm-hmm. They make millions of them, and they make them very well. The closer that you can get to serialized production, the more reliable it will be, the better serviceability you'll have, the better chance you'll be able to get it fixed in the field. If you've got to fly in a technician from EarthRoamer or from EarthCruiser, they're going to know what to bring. They're going to know how to fix it, and your downtime is going to be limited. Whereas the number of catastrophic failures that I've seen with custom expedition vehicles, like frames and these bodies breaking, body mounts, and
you're doing. I mean, even at a very
everything's a
high
one-off
level, everything's a one-off, and there's no repetition.
Yep.
Like it's silly to not, like Lance that owns and runs EarthCruiser in the U.S. He is a smart guy, but also one of the most well-traveled people I've met
in the industry. Yeah, for sure.
He puts his EarthCruiser on a boat. And he's gone for.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone for a while. But it's that experience that then gets integrated into the vehicles.
That's right.
That makes them so good. Like, I mean, I want to make sure I give EarthCruiser some love, because while I love my EarthRoamer, if I was to undertake serious travel, like I don't know when I'm coming back and I'm going to drive around the world, I would do it in an EarthCruiser.
Yeah, put it in a container.
Yeah, they fit in containers. Even if you don't, you get the FX that I don't know if those can. I think you can put different wheels on them. Mm-hmm. The FX has a solid sides, which I think is really cool.
And if not, you row it.
Yeah, they're the right size.
Yeah.
They're a little less intimidating in the vehicle. Like when you see an EarthRoamer, like it's I have to figure an extra 10 minutes to get gas if I'm in a rush, because it's all these people that come over, and I always hate that. So the first question is, how much that thing cost? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to answer it. I don't want to answer it. But with the EarthCruisers, they're a little bit more low key. They fit in a regular parking spot.
They do.
Like, I mean, the EarthRoamers can fit in a parking spot if you have a room to back up. And they're pretty maneuverable with the high steer axle that or, wide track axle or whatever it's called. But the EarthCruisers are this fantastic, well proven.
And they don't look,
perfect
even though they
size.
are not inexpensive, they do not look.
Like they look like a kind of a bread delivery van,
Yeah.
which you either love or hate.
But I think it's an advantage while you're traveling.
Yes.
I think it's an advantage to be in this white, nondescript, looks like a delivery vehicle. And in fact, in most countries, a Fuso is the delivery vehicle. So if you think about the roads, the parking spaces, the turns, like they've got to move goods and services around all these small towns, and that's what they use is vehicles that size.
Yeah. So, there's all these different, layers of the onion to expedition vehicles.
And the fact that it's cab over, so you end up...
Which you either like or you don't like, I have to say.
Well, the ride quality goes down, but the maneuverability goes way up.
Yes.
So there's like everything gets a compromise.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Like personally, I'm not a big cab over guy. So the LMTVs, the man trucks, like things like
Unimogs.
that. I just like driving a pickup truck.
Sure.
Like it's
what you drive every day.
It's very natural to me. My expedition vehicle is no wider than a dually. In fact, it's actually narrower than a modern dually. So
probably marginally.
Yeah, not that much, but it is a couple inches on either side.
8 foot 6 inches wide. Is that how wide your EarthRoamer is?
Never measured it.
Yeah, they're pretty wide.
I just know that how much from the cab, how much it sticks out.
Yeah.
And I know that a dually sticks out more.
Yeah, sure.
Because it has the single rear wheel conversion. But there's a lot of things that go into it. And then I think one of the things we need to talk about for the essentials is the consequences of taking a very heavy vehicle, very remote, with a lot of systems become a lot higher.
Mm-hmm.
I would never, for example, carry a starter in my old Gladiator in my Jeep, because if it broke down, my buddy can throw a strap on the front and we can tow it somewhere to where a tow truck can get it to or whatever. The thing that we learned really quickly when we had this major problem with our truck right after getting it was, oh crap, like if this thing breaks down on the side of the road, it requires like this same wrecker to come get you that would get a semi truck.
Mm-hmm.
Now if you're on the highway, those things are all over. If you're down for a forest road with 4 letters on it,
yeah.
you're if it's something that you're not capable of fixing, you are bringing somebody in. So we, for example, every electronic sensor that's on the engine that could create a no start or no run condition, we carry those. It was just it was like $800 in sensors. But if I don't have them and I need them, what is that going to cost me?
Sure.
We carry a starter. We carry. I continue to run the DPF system on mine. I always say, like, if I have the luxury of owning an EarthRoamer, I can afford to fix and service the DPF, because I like enjoying nature and I don't want to,
Yeah, we never want to pollute unnecessarily.
And it's also illegal to take that off, but some people will.
If you're traveling internationally, you could take it off.
Yeah, we've decided we carry I think it's like the temperature sensors or something that are known to fail. Well, they were like $20. I have like 5 of them. Carrying with you some of those components generally related to the chassis, like if you run out of heat or your AC stops working or something, that's not catastrophic. So you have to plan for those, I'm going to call them catastrophic events. Like obviously if the engine goes poof, there's really nothing that you can do with that. But with most modern vehicles, the core of them are pretty reliable. Like they've made millions of Ford 6.7 engines.
Sure.
We know exactly what the problems are and what
And you bulletproofed yours, as I remember, or did a version of that.
I have some parts from Bulletproof on there. So like I did the Bulletproof EGR. It's not really needed on the 6.7, to be honest. That was more of like a 6.0 thing, where as these emission control systems were starting to come onto the market, there was growing pains for sure. The 6.7 doesn't have many. That motor's still in production. But there were things that we did, for reliability. We did different exhaust manifolds because everything was out. We did a different turbo, not necessarily a performance turbo, although it does flow slightly more. When my motor went poof,
The poof took out the turbo?
It's oil cooled, so you don't then know what gets into that turbo,
Sure.
so you have to replace it. Like the Ford turbos for the early 6.7s are known to have some issues. Ford's pretty good at revising parts, but the basics here that I'm really trying to get at is, develop a relationship with a mechanic that knows the chassis that you have and figure out what is breaking. Because if you have an LMTV or you have some, the man truck that you are not going to get parts for, at the Ford dealer down the street, it's probably smart to carry some of that stuff with. Now, I'm not saying carry a spare transmission, because the transmission might go. Those are those big things that if they happen, you're just going to have to deal with it.
It's just the risk of driving it.
Yeah,
Sure.
and that kind of translates into, if you have the parts, you have to have some skill to be able to replace them. It doesn't mean that you have to do it quick. It just means that you have to get the job done so you can get out.
Sure.
So toolkits are going to be different for an expedition vehicle versus a Jeep. You have large suspension components. Like I carry a socket for the 4-link that is a Kelderman system on my vehicle. Well, I carry the correct sockets and wrenches to be able to service that. Not that I'm expecting necessarily that a bushing's going to fail or this or that, because again, those are things that you drive slowly to a point that you can get further help, because
Sure.
you're not jacking this thing up and doing that in the middle of nowhere. But a bolt might come loose that you need to tighten, and
Sure.
you can fix that before it becomes a problem. So you have to, consider both for the coach, the camper portion, the live-in portion, and then the vehicle, what tools you're going to need to service. On modern vehicles, there's OBD scanners. Like I carry, I think it's like OBD Link 2, and I have this app called 4Scan, and it allows me to have some...
Terrible name.
I know. It allows me to have some basic functionality that, the Ford Diagnostics would have. More than an OBD2 reader, less than the computer that,
Sure.
that Ford has. Things like forcing a regen of the diesel particulate filter.
Oh, sure.
I want to be able to do that.
So you can regen it when you want to, not when you're climbing some big hill or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some tuners that give you that functionality. So like I have a Banks gauge in mine, and I think that's the best thing that I could recommend to any of these trucks, because they're going to be running towards the higher end of their gross vehicle weight rating.
Yeah, your EarthRoamer weighs 19,000 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what is in there. Mine has 117 gallons of fresh water.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's half a ton of water.
But you also did a good job recently of, you had this extra storage box on the back and a bunch of extra things, and you pulled all that off.
I pulled all that off.
You had to have saved hundreds of pounds.
Hundreds of pounds, and I also went through and kind of optimized that spares package. For me, after having the traumatic event with the engine right after getting it, I carried a lot of things that I didn't need.
Yeah.
But pare some of that back based on experience. Like and also I kind of make things modular now. Like I've found that these Pelican 1550 cases, yes, they're a little bit heavier, but they fit in the space really well.
Perfect.
So I have one that is like, that I'm building, that is my big trip kit. Like if I'm driving to the Arctic Ocean again, there's things that I would take with me that would be different than.
Or maybe you're going down to Baja or whatever.
Yeah, or
you
Baja,
want.
or a place where, you know, serviceability is going to be more of a challenge. You know, don't be afraid to kind of segment your kit.
Sure.
You know, I always carry a belt because that's a no start condition. On my truck, I do carry a fuel pump. Not that they're necessarily known for going out, but if they do, the truck's dead in the water, and I have decided to allocate the space for that.
Sure.
So, you know, to kind of wrap it up, you know, carry the tools that you need to service your vehicle. Likely the bolt, the size of the bolt that holds your control arm on for a Jeep, and the one that is on a medium or heavy duty truck chassis, they're going to be different sizes. You know, try and work with that kit when you're at home.
Yeah.
So you have that process of elimination.
Built by off-roaders, for off-roaders. onX Off-Road's Route Builder provides a new solution to your adventure planning with a Snap to functionality. Just draw a line with your cursor and the route will automatically snap to the road or trail. Hit save and the route will sync to your mobile device. Now you're ready to hit the trails. Go farther with onX Off-Road's Route Builder.
I remember there was early on in EarthRoamer, they had a client, I won't name names, but he was a very wealthy Australian that drove an EarthRoamer around the world. And he was in Mongolia when there was a problem with the Ford, you know, either the engine or the turbo or something like that. And the only way around it, because there was no way to move the vehicle safely from where it was at, so he had to just coordinate getting a Ford technician, all the parts, flying them into Mongolia, probably getting in a Land Cruiser, driving to the vehicle and doing this major repair to the Ford in the middle of Mongolia. So
that would not have been cheap. But you do have to consider that if you are going to be taking one of these vehicles to very remote places, that is a possibility.
Yep.
You know, that's why going with, you know, let's maybe transition from this to, there's a lot of DIY guys. Yeah. So let's talk about, you know, let's use as an example, there's so many chassis. There's the LMTV, there's these man chassis. I mean, there's a lot out there. And you primarily see this with European travelers because for whatever reason, there's just a lot of very applicable vehicles there, and there's a much larger expedition vehicle scene.
Go to Aventura and Allrad. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Go look at a Unicat in person. It's just awe-inspiring.
You know, so let's just talk about the guy that buys the ex-military Unimog and, you know, builds their own camper. I think that stuff's great. Like, those are the people that I totally really see traveling.
There's a lot of that out there.
You know, there's a lot of guys that really do use their EarthRoamers and their EarthCruisers and, you know, and other vehicles. I feel bad to keep, you know, defaulting to EarthRoamer and EarthCruiser, but they're just, in the U.S., they are the lion's share.
Yeah, they just have big
volume.
Longer, and they have big volume too.
Yeah, you know, but the DIY guys, you know, I love because they're you know, they'll get their box from Total Composites or box manufacturer, and they really know these vehicles because they've built them, and there's a huge advantage to knowing the systems. The downsides is maybe the guy that's installing the heater or the electrical system or whatever is doing the best that he can, but, you know, maybe isn't a professional electrical engineer or something, right? So, you know, if you're listening to this and it's like, oh, an EarthRoamer or EarthCruiser or GXV, Adrenalin, you know, all of these things are not in the financial budget, which is just a reality. There are a lot of options for building your own, like quite affordably. Like you can, you know, affordability is relative to this space. It is inherently expensive. Like there's no way of getting around the fact that you're going to have to buy very expensive lithium batteries and all of these components.
But you can find a Mitsubishi Fuso FG, let's call it 10 years old, which will be pre-def, pre all that stuff. Yeah. You can find those in the $30,000 range. Yeah. Here in the United States, and then you basically build and there are There's like Total Composites out of Canada
Yeah.
that builds boxes, very affordable.
Yep.
They're unfinished on the inside. So now you've got a proven global platform for $30,000. The box is going to cost you less than that, unfinished.
Yep.
But it's ready to be bolted onto the chassis rails. And then you take the time to do it all yourself.
Yep.
So that you know where every wire is, watch YouTube, learn how to set these things up, and go with well-proven components, put less stuff in the truck than you think you need.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you're off doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's very important for me to stress that this is not just a club for guys that are dropping $500,000 or $1 million on these vehicles. I think the heart and soul of the expedition community are the DIY guys.
Yeah.
I mean, like, frankly, that is who I see traveling internationally, using these vehicles as intended the most, bar none.
Yeah.
An EarthRoamer leaving the U.S. happens, but generally it is the exception.
Yeah.
There are just so many, honestly, people my age in Europe that are building their MOGs or whatever, or they buy a chassis,
Yeah.
modify the chassis. And this is like where Bliss Mobile comes in, and I think that Bliss Mobile is really cool, is you buy this box. Like some really dear friends of ours, Cullen and Candy, actually bought a Bliss Mobile box, and they bought a truck through Bliss Mobile. They live in Arizona. They keep it in Europe, and they do all these cool Bliss Mobile trips with other owners, and there's good camaraderie. But they will be able to, sell that truck off, keep their box, ship it to Bliss Mobile in the United States,
Yep.
have Spencer Park put it on a Ram or put it on, one of the, an Acela truck or something, and their big asset is all pretty much self-contained.
That's
And
right. It
that
still
is-
has their pots and pans.
It still has their pots. Exactly.
It's got their own stuff in there. They just move the box. And then you don't have to, there's no temporary import. There's no carnet.
Yeah.
You're just bringing the box
It's your
in.
asset. There's no
Yeah.
emissions regulations.
Nothing.
On any of that stuff. Now, the thing you do have to note is that there's different voltages. So with these campers, with these expedition vehicles, much like an RV, you have shore power. So you have a 110 based system, like either a 30 or 50 amp. Most of these are 30 amps. And then you're going to, higher voltage,
220, yeah,
240. So, one of the things that I'm currently researching, like, I would love to ship ours to Iceland and then put it on a ferry and then do the Scandinavian, Nordic countries. How do I charge it? Now,
Yeah.
if you're moving every day, that's not really
I
an
think there's
issue.
actually converters.
There are, but there's not a lot of information
Yeah.
on that. So if anybody's actually figured out a solution for that that's actually reliable and isn't
isn't gigantic.
gigantic, that's an interesting thing. But there are these options, and it's actually really cool that Bliss Mobile's in the U.S. now because
Super cool.
They're very reputable. They actually, and I want to give a shout out to them. They have I want to say it's an 8 or a 10-foot box that can go. They're partnering with AEV to build trucks for this new small box size. I mean, if that was out when we bought our EarthRoamer, it would be really hard to not have a brand new, because basically the newer chassis you can get, the more reliable. Personally, I believe that they've become. The faster they are, the better the braking. They're just nicer inside too.
A new vehicle, I mean, I think a lot of people misunderstand that. If you have a 30-year-old 80 series Land Cruiser, which when it was new was one of the most reliable vehicles ever made.
Yeah.
But a 30-year-old 80 series Land Cruiser is no more reliable or less reliable than a new Land Rover. I mean, it's just the reality. Having a new car with new belts, like all the new systems, it's going to be more reliable.
There's things that time
than an
out.
old car.
There's a lot of things that, and this is maybe, again, going back to the guys that are looking at doing this from a DIY level, is, if you find the Unimog, the LMTV, whatever chassis you're choosing, a lot of times these are ex-military, and there's this idea, they're well maintained. Sometimes, yes. And sometimes you can find them with shockingly low miles or kilometers on them. but the oil seals don't care.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of components that will
Anything
time
rubber.
out. Anything rubber.
Yep.
It's time related, not necessarily mileage related.
For sure.
So, not saying that it's not a good idea. You can get a lot of bang for your buck, but you then have to prepare for having the rear main seal for an obscure Unimog engine that in the United States we don't get.
Yep. That's why I keep coming back to that Mitsubishi Fuso FG.
Yeah.
Like 10-year-old.
Yeah.
It's going to be pre-def.
They put
no particulate filter.
They put 1 million miles on those
all day long.
All day long.
Yeah. They're pretty good.
Yeah. So, recovery also changes from the kind of recreational four-wheel drive side to the expedition vehicle side. I've got a lot of max tracks because that's my gig, but I carry 8 because one of the things that I'm most worried about, like, I think if I'm going to get stuck in an expedition vehicle, I'm probably aware that there's a risk.
Sure.
But the things that you don't think of are, it rains overnight, you're in a field, and that much weight, like, the roads give way. A lot of the, there was the Unimog, which I think was a GXV in Big Bend.
Yeah.
That, had to have a helicopter come and, bring it up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on driver error or anything there, but the fact is the road gave way.
Yeah.
There was recently an EarthRoamer that was a big recovery thing that was on Instagram. Road gave way.
Yeah.
You have to, not only in the recovery scenario, but how you drive them, you have to give yourself more room. You don't want to put your tire on wet soil on a shelf road at the very end. And you should have the training to get yourself out of some of these situations.
That's right.
A lot of these vehicles will have front and rear winches, but they're only as good as your training. Most likely, like I have, I'm not saying it's the largest winch that Warren offers, but I have a Warren 16.5 on the front of my vehicle. The chassis is rated for 19.5. Generally, you want 50% more.
Yeah.
But it's just not really available, so I have to...
Lots of pulley blocks.
And knowing how to do those things, that's where I really like the MaxTrack stuff, because if you're on unstable ground, you have something that you can winch up onto to at least stabilize the situation. Because if the road gave way once, there's a strong likelihood that it could give way more as things move. So building a kit that is appropriately sized to the weight of the vehicle. And that may, that means that the great recovery gear that you've invested in for your Jeep, it's not going to work over here.
It's not. And you may want to have another expedition vehicle with you. You may want to travel with a buddy, which is why I do see...
If you're doing technical stuff.
Yeah. That's why anytime we really pushed it with the EarthRoamers, we made sure we had a couple of them along because, it doesn't matter how capable Wrangler is, it weighs 1/3 what an EarthRoamer
you're
does.
just
it's just not going to pull it out.
You're just going to be trying to get an elephant to move on a leash. It's
just not going to work.
It's not going. So
definitely recovery comes to mind, and being very cautious. I like the idea of someone putting an e-bike on the back of their EarthRoamer or EarthCruiser, take your pick. Having something like that becomes your scout vehicle. I have used drones a lot with expedition vehicles
we just got one,
where I'm flying ahead and I'm looking at the terrain. Is this going to put me along a shelf road? Particularly on shelf roads, I like to go ahead and make sure that, this is the next place I can turn around. I come back, I drive to that place, and I stop again.
Yeah.
And I confirm and also it gives the chance to run into people coming the other direction and just be like, is there any way you could stop here for about 15 minutes until I make it to this clearing so you can come around me?
Yeah.
Because if you run into... If you're the one that's coming downhill, you should be giving way to whoever's coming back, who's going uphill. And are you going to back an EarthRoamer or a EarthCruiser or a GXV up a shelf road? That's very, very challenging. So I think having a little e-bike or having a small dirt bike,
or bicycle or whatever.
Yep, bicycle, whatever turns you on.
And to build on that, recognizing that the consequences are different in the same way that you maybe need to carry some additional spares that you wouldn't in a Jeep. Your mindset cannot be the same as if you were in a Jeep. You have to adjust your risk level because the consequences become much higher, much quicker.
Yeah.
You know, simple situation, like you're saying, Shelfred, somebody's coming down the hill. You know, you can't just kind of pull up on the bank and let them by. It's, you know, some of these vehicles aren't maybe as wide as people think. You know, like I know on my Roamer, the mirrors are still the same width as a Ford pickup truck.
Sure.
And they still stick out further.
Sure.
You know, there is some mental game there, but you have to consider those things.
But again, like you said, you have to give them some room. So you're getting right up to the edge of the shelf road, which could give way because of the weight of the vehicle. You know, 1,000 Jeeps came through there before then, and the road never gave way because they didn't weigh 18,000 pounds. So I do think it requires a mindset change to say, I have my house with me. Why am I in a rush if I've got my house with me?
Yep.
I'm going to take my time. I'm going to stage here. I'm going to verify that the route ahead is safe. I'm going to use multiple communication devices and navigation tools to make good choices. And because anytime I've ever gotten in trouble with an expedition vehicle, it has always been because I'm like, oh, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one platform that I found to be surprisingly nimble and really not an issue was a Unicat on a Unimog. So it was like the 416, isn't that right? Like it's kind of it's not the really old Unimog, it's not the brand new Unimog.
Boxy,
yeah, very boxy.
80s one.
Yeah, like late 80s, early 90s Unimog, and it had a fairly small Unicat camper on the back of it, and we were driving it around Southern Africa. And the stuff that we did with that was, I mean, it was a challenge for the Land Cruisers that were with us. This vehicle had no trouble.
Yeah.
Lock all the diffs, 200 to 1 low range. It was incredible.
And they're stable, portal axles. Like it's you know, it's just bigger. And
but
I think
it was short wheelbase. It was fairly compact.
Yeah. So that's one of the things to recognize is, do you have an expectation of doing the same trails that you have historically done in a pickup or a Jeep or whatever? Like, are you trying to accomplish the same level of capability but with more comfort? That needs to dictate what vehicles you're purchasing.
Yeah, for sure.
But most people, when they buy these, you know, it's an RV that is capable of extended dirt road travel.
Yeah.
You need the larger tires not only to look cool, but because you need the load carrying capacity of that tire. Like on EarthRoamers and EarthRoamers actually run a Unimog tire. It's the Continental MPT 81. They are the best thing on that truck, but also the worst thing. They're rated to 68 mile an hour. If you, the truck will do a lot more than 68. But there's a lot of guys that they're on a stretch of pavement. They're not paying attention. All of a sudden they're doing 80. It's 100 degrees out in Texas, and the tires shred.
They blow out.
That is what
catastrophic.
happens. And they're like,
fit.
"Oh, I can't believe this." I'm like, "Oh, I can," because you're at the extreme of what that tire can carry in terms of pressure, and then you're exceeding the speed, and it's hot, and all these
68
things.
miles an hour. You're right. That is as fast as you can drive an EarthRoamer on MPTs. That's it.
Yeah, I think with the new, there's like a 43 MPT that is like a 75 mile an hour rating. But, you know, these tires have to carry, you know, you can't have a dual rear tire on an off-road vehicle because rocks, sticks, debris get stuck in the middle. It becomes an issue.
It does.
Very quickly. So you're currently right now, you know, in the same way that like the limiting factor of a lot of travel trailers and toy haulers was what the vehicles could tow. You know, they've gotten bigger as the tow vehicles are higher performing. You know, the vehicles right now, if smart, have to be built to the capability of those tires.
It's limited by that.
And
the MPTs are really good off-road. They handle, they don't chunk, they rarely have flats. They're very, very durable. They're heavy-duty military tires. You got to
keep them within their range,
That's
though.
right.
Their range of design, because, you know, particularly like the new, like, again, to keep going back to EarthRoamers, but the new LTIs, they're a little lighter, right? Because they're carbon fiber composite camper, but they have more horsepower and they have a 10-speed transmission, so they can just chug up stuff and go as fast as you really want. Doesn't mean that you actually can.
That's right.
You have to, you're driving a medium duty or a heavy duty commercial truck, no matter what you're doing in any expedition vehicle. You are not building an expedition vehicle on an F-150. Like there's that one company out of that has, God, what are they? Something North that's building like these, technically they're an expedition vehicle, but they're putting them on an F-150.
Yeah.
And they have like boat speakers on the back.
Yeah.
The tires aren't there. The chassis is not there. You're not building them on an LT truck. You're building them on a medium duty or heavy duty vehicle.
That's right.
And you have to adjust your mindset.
Yeah, and to go off-road in technical terrain, particularly if you get into mud, you've got to have these MPTs, but then you're capped on the speed. So if anybody listening that owns an EarthRoamer, check your speed right now when you're going down the road.
Yeah.
It's 68 miles an hour.
Travel slower.
That's it. You just
Yeah.
need to slow down. Go with the same speed as the trucks. Just cruise along. Get into a slower speed. And just remember, if anything goes wrong, if you have a blowout or a cow runs into the road or
Always going to be better when you're going slower.
you're going to be way better off having started off going slower.
Yeah, a lot of these vehicles have pretty impressive braking
They do.
systems, but once you're out of clamping pressure and those tires lock up,
Yep.
your tire doesn't. At the end of the day, it's the tire that transfers the braking force to the ground.
That's right.
Once that tire locks up, even with ABS, there's still 20,000 pounds to stop.
Yep.
So in a lot of ways, it's driving like you're towing something really heavy. You have to watch the temperatures.
And then making sure that you put as much weight forward as you can. I'll look at some of these vehicles and the back seat area will be completely empty, and then the back of the vehicle is overloaded with all the really heavy stuff.
It's shocking how many back seats are empty without a Greyhound in expedition vehicles.
But you got to move the weight forward because the rear tire is almost always the one that blows out.
They're a large vehicle, so small changes are hard to notice. But by taking that rear case off, and that accomplished two things. One, it was the weight of the case that I removed, and then two, I moved things forward.
And you probably removed things altogether.
I removed things altogether, but I also I shifted that weight forward closer to the axle, so you've got less of that pendulum effect on the back end. It's much better off-road. It's easier. You do notice 500 pounds, right?
And your overall length is less.
Yeah. So let's talk about actually the campers for a second.
Okay.
You've kind of got to be aware that things are going to break inside of these campers. Like I carry extra latches. If you've got a bunch of pots and pans and something, some of these campers will have like little magnetic latches that reinforce things. You need to carry latches. I carry a small thing of wood screws because, when I first got it and we were maybe using it more off-road than most, although actually Kevin, who owned mine, did use it off-road quite a bit, latches would break. I have kind of like a small, I'm going to call it like coach kit that stays in the camper and it fixes things that are going to be problems inside.
Sure.
So you do have to consider that. Like I keep my truck stuff outside. I keep my small little camper kit inside.
Being careful about how much weight you put on the fridge door. That's a thing that a lot of people don't think about. Don't overload the spice cabinet with wine, bottles. It's meant for spices, lightweight, or else those things fail. The other thing I notice is that people will leave their water pumps on while they're traveling on dirt roads, which results in cavitation of the pump oftentimes because of the vibration. So shut those things off when you're going down the road. Make sure, give it a walk around outside and in, because it's shocking the number of times that people will pull away and the black water drain hose is still connected or the charging hose, or they set their coffee cup on the back bumper or whatever because they were in camp. give the vehicle a complete walk around on the outside, and then on inside, pull on every cabinet, make sure everything's closed and latched.
Developing that kind of pre-drive
Yes.
checklist.
You got to do it every time.
I don't have a notepad where I'm making stuff.
I don't think you need to. Just walk around and look.
You know what? Let's start on that kind of, preparation, and it's always, your vehicle is going to tell you things. On commercial trucks, wheel bearings are more of a thing, so hub temperature. So when I start my checks when I get out of the vehicle. Like every time I get fuel or I stop, I put my hand on the tire, and I put my hand near the hub.
Yep.
Because if that wheel bearing's going, it's going to be creating a lot of heat.
Yep.
You check things like that before we leave for, whether we just had lunch or whatever. I go and I verify every latch is closed, because if you're gonna, it sounds so trivial, but if you stop for lunch and you're on an extended off-road trail or whatever, and you break a latch and you don't have a replacement, like the solution is that you then take the drawer out, put it on your bed or something.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just going to sit there, and that's how they really break, is people forget to latch them or whatever.
And they slam closed. I was on one trip and their overhead cabinet wasn't latched, and I can't remember what it was, some kind of a pot or pan came out, and it landed squarely on the induction cooktop.
Ooh.
And it damaged it.
And then
destroyed,
you have glass everywhere.
It had there was glass everywhere inside, and it destroyed the induction cooktop. So they had no way
to cook.
No way to cook.
Yeah.
So it's, if you just take an extra couple minutes to give it now we should be doing that with every vehicle.
Yeah.
And I have a daily and a weekly check sheet that I do on every trip, but it's even more important with these campers because you're literally going down the road with your house on the back. And I mean, some of these things actually have a washing machine.
Yeah.
Which
I thought was ridiculous. And
until you live on the road.
Until you live on the road and you're like, oh man, I just spent like 2 hours trying to find a place to do laundry. Cooking is a big thing too. You're no longer in the realm of little butane stoves. You can bring more, which means you can prepare more extravagant
or healthy meals.
Healthy meals. Like, it sounds silly. We almost exclusively cook in our Instant Pot now. It's a one pot. I do the dishes, and then Laura cooks because she's
a great cook.
She's a wonderful cook. But that's one less thing for me to clean, which, not every one of these vehicles has huge water storage, or you may be trying to conserve water. Like when we take it down to Baja, we're a little bit less. We generally try and run on the water that we have because we know it comes from our house, and the unfortunate reality of traveling in some places is that the water isn't always.
Or it's hard to get to
water.
Purified water station.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's less to clean. It's all, self-contained. It uses actually very little energy. So once it heats up, it's just cooking on pressure. We're even thinking about bringing like a little air fryer.
Awesome.
We don't use we have a diesel burner, and we have like a microwave convection oven thing. We have never used those things because these, there's so many one pot meals that you can do in an Instant Pot.
And then you can make French fries or whatever in
you
the
can do whatever
air
you
fryer.
want.
Yeah, make cookies in the air fryer.
I mean, we use it at home a lot.
Yeah, sure.
Laura has even made kind of like a little cookbook for EarthRoamer recipes, and it simplifies trying to figure out what you're doing. I mean, I'm sure most people can relate to this, but you're going out camping, whether it's with your buddies, your family, or whatever, and you know how to grocery shop for home.
Sure.
But then you don't know how to grocery shop for camping. So having repeatability with the things that you're making, or one of 20 to choose from, and cool, this is what I need for my list, that has been huge for us.
Yeah.
It's removed a pain point of travel because you're going to grocery stores that you're not familiar with, whatever.
Yeah.
So.
That's great advice. And on the interior layout, just making it as open and spacious and simple as possible is a great idea. I would never want to have an expedition vehicle that didn't have a shower and a toilet. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, I see some that don't. Or, one of my beefs with on any pop top is that when you're traveling, assuming you're traveling with somebody for a while and you have to use the bathroom to do a number 2, like you don't want to like be sitting under this half wall. Like that's one of the reasons why I like hard-sided.
You want some
campers.
privacy.
Yeah, if I have to go drop one, like even if you're married to that person, like you don't want to be making eye contact when you're doing it. Yeah,
that's a good point, though. I mean, it depends on the person.
Yeah.
Some couples, maybe they hold hands while they do that. Who knows? But you just
that's
like for
on
everybody has different needs, and it's being really honest about what you need.
Yeah.
And if one of your goals is to get to remote technical places, you're going to end up with you should get a much smaller camper.
Yeah.
If you just really want an all-wheel drive RV, then get something big. Because you might as well have the washing machine in there, if you can afford it. I mean, really, it's being, I think, honest about what you want. Because unfortunately, a lot of these expedition vehicles, decisions are made around how it reflects the ego as opposed to how it reflects the traveler's needs. Your ego is going to get a bump no matter what. So just let that part of it go, because you're going to be driving something super cool no matter what version.
They're all pretty cool.
They're all super cool. So no matter what version you get. And the problem is like spending $2 million on a camper, like no one can even relate to that. So it's really about buying what you need that really meets your needs.
I don't want to like disparage the company or anything, but like a lot of the like GXV guys that do these very extravagant builds, like they're at Overland Expo and then they're just off into the ether. Like you never hear of or see these people traveling.
Yeah.
Because I think, they're obviously very expensive. So I always correlate the ability to afford something with probably being, fairly busy. And it's like it's this project.
Yeah.
It's like they're building their boat, but then they realize I didn't really need the party deck on top of my camper.
Yeah.
Like that's the worst place to put weight on one of these vehicles. Spend some time in one. Unfortunately, it's really hard to rent these because I get people that ask me, will you rent your EarthRoamer for a week or whatever? I'm like, absolutely
There's not a number that works.
Because if you just get somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and they're going up a hill and they just have the thing, pegged going up, a large grade, like you could blow the motor on it.
For sure.
They don't latch the latches because that's, it's just new. I'm not saying it's negligence, but they just don't know. And then, you got to get a woodworker in or something. So it's hard to know, but generally I think go with the smallest camper and the least amount of stuff that keeps you comfortable. Like, it is all like being able to be inside of something that is, kind of climate controlled. That is the luxury. You don't need the, rare Grecian marble backsplash.
Yeah, you really don't.
You don't need the, whatever some of these extravagant things are.
And really consider
you
this.
get people that want like bathtubs.
I know.
And I'm like, takes 100 gallons of water to do a bathtub. Like, buy a Class A.
Yeah, true. It's so true. And then be in a campsite where you're plugged into city water and you can have all the things you want.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of importance around if you have the resources, getting the serialized unit, because you're going to end up with a better experience, better serviceability, better reliability, but you're also going to gain back a bunch of time. A good friend of mine built a custom expedition camper. He was not resource constrained, but he decided he wanted to do it his way. And it took him almost 2 years to build the vehicle. And I asked him what, of any regrets that he had. He said, my number one regret is that I didn't just buy an EarthRoamer and leave.
Yeah.
And so fill in their EarthCruiser and leave, Adrenalin Camper and leave. Like, buy something that is a serialized unit that has a high degree of reliability that's been well proven, and then go. We only have so much time.
Yeah.
And that was his number one regret, is that he got exactly the vehicle that he wanted with all of the gadgets, all of the custom bumpers and suspension and all that other stuff. But he said I lost 2 years.
Yeah.
Of experiences.
And you can try and optimize as much as you want, but like the reality is that hotels exist.
Yeah.
Like if rather than getting something that's like massive, like I don't think they're making that EarthRoamer HD anymore. I think it was just too big.
It's too big.
Just too much stuff.
It's just too
big.
big.
Like if you need the washer and dryer or this, and you have the coin to drop $1 million, $2 million on something, presumably then you have the coin to just stay at a nice hotel and say dry clean this or whatever. Like I know that's not like the ethos of traveling and what we like to promote, but
there's nothing wrong with that either.
You can still stay in if you're after absolute comfort, like at least once a week we stay in a hotel when we're doing extended travels, because living in a small box with another person is still like living in a small box with another person. Like, I want to go have a drink at the hotel
despite
bar,
what the backsplash is made out of. Yeah,
exactly. So be realistic and, try and get something that's as small. Like the EarthRoamers that I always look at with envy are they have like the suicide door on the back.
They're the extended cab.
The extended cab that are the LTs. I always look at those with a lot of envy. But then I'm like, okay, like that would be great for like more off-road. Like I would love to drive one of those to South America. They don't make them anymore. But in reality, I need the full back seat for the dog.
Sure.
And there's 3 of us in this space that from the outside looks really big, but on the inside isn't actually that huge. And it was worth it to have the 2 feet, so I'm really happy with that. Could I have
You are happy, and look at how long you've kept the vehicle. It's literally met all of your needs, and I think that's the key. Is there's a reason why they sell so many EarthRoamers, is because they are kind of dialed.
Yeah,
it's the same reason why they sell so many EarthCruisers. They're dialed. I lived in one for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I loved it.
Yeah,
I absolutely loved it.
They're really good, and there are a lot of these things are very expensive. There's just no way of beating around the bush with that. But
everything's expensive.
Everything has become expensive.
Yeah.
But there are options that are out there now that are comparable in size and functionality that are becoming more affordable. Again, like somebody's like, oh, well, that's still more than my house. Like, yeah, it's an expensive space. Like, that's why the core of it is, and the soul of it to me is still like the DIY guys that are building their own campers.
And there's a lot of them out there.
And there's a lot. But, Adrenalin has come out with something that's really attractive. The Adventure Trucks XT, which is kind of a sub of GXV. They were acquired by the group behind Storyteller. There are options and in this space these days. And I think it's going to be really cool to see where it goes, because I see so much interest in it. I really see this kind of, there's like this progression of, they start with the ground tent, they go to the roof tent, they go to the hardshell tent, maybe a truck camper or a wedge camper, and then it's van, as people's families grow, as you get older and you want a little bit more comfort. It seems like this is a segment of the industry that will continue to grow, and as it does, it will become more competitive, and there should be more options available for different price ranges. And once we start seeing vehicles like this at RV dealers, and even EarthRoamer and EarthCruiser now, you can finance them.
Finance is a 20-year RV loan. So.
Some of them you can finance as equipment to kind of keep your cash, making money. And if you we could still sell ours for more than we paid for it. That's not always going to be the case. But with some of these vehicles, when you start, you're in these financial circles, they don't want to wait the year. So you can use yours, and if it's in, kind of like new condition, maybe you put 10, 15,000 miles onto it, you're probably selling it for what you bought it for.
Yeah.
That's where we're at currently. It's not financial advice, but there's been a lot of people I know that have, gotten a new EarthRoamer every year or two, and we know a lot of these guys. And, it just keeps waterfalling, cascading over.
That's right.
So.
And expedition vehicles are a comfortable way to travel. If you want to be on the road for a long period of time, it's kind of nice to have your space.
Yep.
Despite the weather, It could be minus 20 out or whatever. There's reasons why they're popular, and they are popular globally. They're probably the most popular in Germany and
Germany
in that part
has such a
Europe,
huge scene. Germany,
really
Switzerland, Austria. Yeah, very, very popular there. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yep.
I geek out on this stuff, so if anybody has any questions, reach out to me on Instagram. It's just Matt Explorer.
Yep. All right, so there are some really great books out there. This one, those that are on the YouTubes, that you can see it. This one is written by Ulrich Dolde, and this is not in English, but you can buy an electronic version that is in English. It was translated.
It's called Wohnmobil.
Wohnmobil, and it is kind of the Bible of expedition vehicles.
I didn't even know about this one.
Yeah, so that one's kind of insane. And then there's actually like we all grew up with Haynes manuals. Believe it or not, there is actually an overland camper.
It's really big in Europe.
Yeah, so there's a Haynes manual, overland camper, by Mr. Wigglesworth.
Oh my
Literally,
God.
Steve Wigglesworth. I don't know Steve. Awesome name.
You have an amazing last name.
You have an amazing last name. And then this one here, when it comes to driving expedition vehicles off-road, this book here is incredibly valuable. It has English and German captions, but it talks a lot about technique in driving these really large expedition vehicles and campers off-road. So this one's really important because there is some adjustments to how they need to be driven.
Yeah. I didn't even know about this.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so Unimog Geländefahrschule. So just Unimog Off-Road Driving School.
Yeah.
So Gisbert Hindennacht. Cool.
Yeah, so there's, but I think for the DIY, you really want to try to find the Ulrich Dolde book. I believe that Michael Braley is going to be your contact on that out of Germany. If you go to, I think they're Overland Europe.
Wow, this really dives in.
Yeah, so
Diesel
that one's really, really nuanced, and it's also very current. So these books, oftentimes around building campers, have an expiration date because the systems change so often. But this book is only maybe a year old, so
Wow.
it's
this
very
is
current.
really cool.
It's very current and extremely detailed, and you can get an English version that's been translated. So
Very cool.
a lot of resources out there. Of course, there's a lot of conversations on Expedition Portal Forum around Expedition Camper DIY builds. There's a huge community.
That's where I've gotten most of my information
There's
from.
a lot of community activity still around that. There's some good Facebook groups too. Matt has offered to answer all of your questions via Instagram DM. So
Yeah, as many as I can. And there's also a lot of people, that I follow that are in the process of building their trucks.
True.
That you can follow on Instagram so you
Yep.
can see what they're doing, how they're doing it. And maybe that's your first step, is it's just some basis
that's right.
for it.
That's right. So consider an expedition vehicle. And if you build your own, we would love to see a picture of it.
Yeah.
You can post it up at a future date. And we thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.